So there's a whole sub-genre of photographs which people have just started to get interested in, called walking photos. And these, if you're watching this and you're probably over the age of 50, you might even remember day trip to the seaside when you were a kid, walking down the promenade, photographer comes up, takes your picture, you probably didn't even realise it, thrusts like a little raffle ticket into your hand with a number on it, and then later in the day you could go back to the beach hut and find your photograph and buy a picture of you walking down the prom. Now that might sound a bit strange these days, but back then, from maybe the end of the Second World War through to the early 60s, not everybody had a camera, and even if they lucky enough to have somebody with a camera in the family, nearly always it was the husband or the dad that had the camera, which means most of the pictures would be of wife and kids and not of the whole family. So this was sometimes one of the very few chances that you had of having maybe husband and wife or the whole family group together. And they would take pictures like this. These are actually fairly early ones. The whole system really took off at the end of the First World War and reached its heyday round about the middle of the 40s through to the middle of the 50s. So these are the sort of prints that you might find in your family photo album. They were enlarged to postcard size. They would have cost 2 shillings a time. And really, you would think that's possibly the only record of these sort of photographs that are left. Well, we've been really lucky in this sale because we have what is almost unheard of, a selection of the paper negatives which came out of the camera. The paper negatives, so they use a roll of photographic paper inside the camera, which gave you a paper negative. The paper negative was then rephotographed to give you a positive, probably enlarged a bit because these are 2¼ by 3½, so they would be enlarged to maybe postcard size. So these sort of things hardly ever exist because they were meant to be used once and then thrown away, or maybe just stored for a couple of days, and then they were off and running the next day, take some more pictures of people. And there were several different companies doing this sort of thing, one of which was called Sunbeam Photos, that were based down in Margate in Kent. And as you can see, different cards from different companies, because they were using different cameras, they're different sizes. So these are quite an unusual survivor. And what hardly ever survives is this. So this is part of an uncut roll of the paper negatives which have come out of one of the cameras used by Sunbeam Photos. Now Sunbeam were probably the biggest company doing these walking type photos in the country, and they had several branches all the way along the Kent coast. So true Blue Peter style, here's one I did earlier. So this is an enlarged copy of the paper negative, and then when it's photographed you end up with a positive. And this is really fantastic because obviously not only you can see husband and wife walking along the prom, but it's pretty obvious in the background that the picture was taken by Sunbeam Photos. So these are a very rare survivor, but what never survives and what is really difficult finding any information on the actual cameras. Well, until now that is, because this is actually one of the cameras that was used by Sunbeam Photos, and it was designed from the ground up. It may look a little Heath Robinson, but it does everything it needs to do. It's a focusing lens, decent quality Tessar lens on there. It's designed to take a roll of 100, a strip of photographic paper that would allow 100 exposures on one roll, as we saw earlier. And believe it or not, this is the actual camera that took these prints. And how do we know? Well, because this is Sunbeam camera number 11. See the number there? It's number 11 on the top, number 11 on the back, number 11 on the inside. And at first I didn't realise it, but this is actually a number 11 on the top of the paper negative, which then is cropped out when the print is made. So several of these have got different numbers because obviously it's a big company, so they had several cameras and they might have had one camera maybe away being serviced or being reloaded, so they had to keep the cameras turning around. And then if you look, it's quite remarkable how relatively even the spacing is in between each photograph. And I couldn't quite work out how they managed to do that with what's essentially a homemade camera. So although it's quite a good quality, it's a one-piece die casting, but it's just got a real dead simple wind-on mechanism here. So obviously if you've got a roll of paper that's going to take 100 shots, it's pretty thick. So as you get through the roll, you'll need a less number of turns to move the paper the same amount. So I couldn't work out how that was done. The photographer can't count because he's too busy. He can't say, oh, this is shot number 12, I only need to move this 3 times, and shot number 27, I need to move it twice or whatever. So then I had a look inside the camera. I can get it open. And you can see here, here's the this is the take-up spool. So the spool here would have all the unexposed paper on it. This is spring-loaded to keep some tension on there. And again, it says number 11 on the inside. And if you look very carefully, you probably can't see it unless we do a close-up. But there's actually a number 11 on a little piece of plastic in there, and that prints the number 11 on the onto the paper negative. But that still doesn't answer how the photographer knew how much to move the wind on. Until we look at this. So this is the back of the camera, and as you can see, there's the typical red window that you get on most cameras of the day. And if we turn over this roll of untrimmed paper, you'll see there's a number printed on the top, which corresponds to the number of the photograph. So what happened was, when this was in the camera, like this, with 3 hands, the photographer took the picture, he then wound on, looking at the little red window on the back until the next number came in the centre of the window, took another picture, did the same, wound on till the number was centralised in the red window. So really simple, really effective, and obviously the photographer hadn't got time to waste, he just needed to take a picture. He was selling the prints at maybe 2 shillings a time, so he just needed to be taking hundreds and hundreds of pictures, one after the other. And the camera, as I say, is reasonably sophisticated. It's got a focusing lens here, and it's graduated when you move this pointer here from 4 feet to infinity. So that allowed the photographer would pre-focus, wait for someone to come the required distance, take the picture. So if it's a walkie picture, he would maybe like 6 or 10 feet away, but there's some here which are obviously much closer, and this will allow him to work from a close-up of about 4 feet. So really, really unusual to find. Might not look very much, but historically a very important camera. This would have taken probably tens of thousands, if not more, of photographs. That'd be all around the country. Everybody's photo albums maybe got one of these in it from their parents or their grandparents, but you never see the hardware.